So this video is going to be a little different from my usual content. Thought I'd try making a countdown video. This won't be a constant thing here. I have a couple ideas for lists, but the main focus will still be on reviews and discussion videos. But hey, it's nearly Halloween. I know exactly what topic to use. Horror has always been an interesting genre for me. I like it as a theme and aesthetic, but when it comes to actual horror movies and games, they don't do much for me. I prefer Aliens to the original as an example. The main issue is that movies and games don't scare me very easily, but every rule has exceptions. While it wasn't common, there were a few things in games that did actually scare me, and that is what I'm going to talk about. Here are 8 things in video games that scared me. Also, keep in mind, these are things that scared me, not things that currently scare me. Pretty much nothing on this list scares me anymore, but let's get right in. 8! I've always thought that games that aren't full-on horror games are much more effective at scaring you than actual horror games. And that's going to be a running theme of this list, as only one entry is from an actual horror game. When you're playing a horror game, you're expecting it to be scary, or at least try to be scary. But when something scary happens in any other game, it tends to catch you off guard. Especially when you're playing an action game, one where you're an unstoppable badass mowing down hordes of bad guys with ease. As a kid, I used to watch my sister play games that I otherwise was not allowed to play. One of those games was Halo Combat Evolved. This game practically invented the badass Space Marine trope in games. You play as a character only known as the Master Chief. Such a title commands respect. But it gets better. He's part of a secret military project of cyborg super soldiers named after the Spartans, some of the biggest badasses in history. You're described as being easily the best soldier around, and the game does a good job at making you feel powerful as you slaughter alien scum left and right. So what's there to be afraid of in this game? If you're so strong and capable, what could possibly scare you? After all, fear comes from a sense of helplessness, and the Master Chief is anything but helpless. You see, one reason why non-horror games can be more effective at horror than dedicated horror games is because in a horror game, you are never powerful. If you were powerful, there'd be nothing to be afraid of. So in horror games, you are rarely ever some badass super soldier. No, you're usually just an average guy who is only barely able to fight back. And in a lot of cases, you can't fight back at all. You need to run. But if it isn't a horror game, then you aren't restricted. And because you know just how powerful you are, it makes you feel even more helpless when you confront something that is able to overwhelm you. For the first half of Halo, when you're up against only the Covenant, the tone is fairly optimistic. The Covenant are shown to be a big threat, but there is hope and victory thanks to the Master Chief. You're gonna fight back.
Man, we let those dumb bugs out to the middle of nowhere to keep from getting their filthy claws on Earth. But we stumbled onto something that's so hot for that they're scrambling over each other to get it. Well, I don't care if it's God's own anti-son of a bitch machine or a giant hula hoop, we're not gonna let them have it. What we will let them have is a belly full of lead and a pool of their own blood to drown in. Am I right, Marines?
Sir, yes, sir!
Damn right I am. Now move it out! Double time!
But then something changes. You get dropped off in a dark swamp, and the tone is shifted. The first thing you see are grunts and jackals running away. At first you might think they're running from you. After all, you are the scariest thing around, right? But as you go through this level, something just doesn't feel right. There are barely any enemies, and there aren't any elites around. The elites are usually the main threat. The grunts and jackals are mostly cannon fodder, or support units. They're commanded by the elites, but there aren't any of them around. This level invokes a feeling of unease, and it only gets worse the farther in you go. You find a facility, but with not much living inside. There are bloodstains and corpses, but not much else. What is this green goop dripping from the ceiling? You do find one living human, but he's gone crazy and attacks you. What the hell happened here? But eventually, you find one of the soldiers' helmets that had recorded what happened. These soldiers were investigating the place as well, but they were attacked by some weird creatures that look like brains. And right after seeing that, they start to swarm you. I remember as a kid watching my sister play this, and just seeing the motion sensor light up all around you. I remember seeing hundreds of red dots coming in all directions. Now clearly that memory is an exaggeration, but the point is that's what it felt like at the time, and it kind of freaked me out, especially since these things are called the Flood. It really did feel like a flood of enemies coming from all directions, and it only got worse when these bigger things start attacking. They're unlike anything else you've fought so far. All the previous enemies would use projectiles, only using melee if you got close enough, but these things just rush to you, and they're resilient bastards. You can blast off limbs, but they'll keep coming. Sometimes they'll fall down, making you think they're dead, but then they just get back up. At first it's hard to tell what these things even are, but then you realize they're elites. They've been zombified by those brain things. And then you find human versions. If that wasn't bad enough, they start using weapons. Let's also not forget about this elevator. Before this point, you were the scariest thing around. But now there's a new threat beyond your control. The Flood are overwhelming. They feel like they can come from anywhere, and you need to adjust your tactics to fight them. The tone of the game has changed at this point. It wasn't about fighting alien scum anymore. Now it was about getting out alive and preventing this parasite from leaving with you. Now when I first saw this level, it wasn't super scary to me, but as I said, it did freak me out a bit. And it stuck with me. When I think of Halo, this is one of the first things that comes to mind. It's so well done, and I believe it pushes this game from being good to great. Imagine Halo without the Flood. I may not be the biggest Halo fan, in fact the first one is really the only one I care about, but I think the Flood is a very big part of the series, and it's a shame the later games don't utilize them. But as it stands, I'd say the Flood are one of the coolest versions of zombies. They're creative, memorable, and pretty terrifying.
Seven!
One of my favorite things about Star Wars that I think are really underutilized in both the movies and games are the bounty hunters.
Bounty hunters? We don't need that scum.
I've always really liked the concept of bounty hunters, and we really need more bounty hunter games. I'm still bitter about Prey 2. I mean, really, there aren't many games about being a bounty hunter. Sure, you technically could count all the Metroid series as Samus is a bounty hunter, but you never really feel like you're hunting bounties. You don't feel like a hunter, at least I don't. But aside from that, I can only think of one game about being a bounty hunter, and it is, fittingly enough, called Star Wars Bounty Hunter. This game isn't the greatest in the world, it is a bit underrated, but nothing spectacular. But the story is pretty good. I'd say easily better than all the prequels. In this game you play as Jango Fett. The main goal is tracking down a specific bounty. After the first few levels, Jango gets a message from Count Dooku. He had chosen Jango to be part of a select few to partake in a special hunt. He's offering 5 million credits for Kamari Vosa, who is the leader of the Bando Gora, a shadowy and secretive organization. Right away you're told the Bando Gora is not to be trifled with.
No, Django. Not the Bando Gora. It's too dangerous even for you.
Like you said, this hunt can make me.
Or break you. No bounty hunter who set out after the Bando Gora has ever returned.
Throughout the game, you're searching for information on the Bando Gora in order to find where Kamari Vosa is. And as you do, you'll learn that they have deep connections. You're reminded of their presence and the danger they possess throughout the game.
You hear much about the Bando Gora?
Bando Gora? Are you crazy? Just talking about them out loud get you killed.
People will tell you just how dangerous going after Vosa is.
Save me the trouble and tell me where Kamari Vosa is right now.
Vosa! Komari Vosa! Mukologa! Bona Naikachu!
Even some of their contacts are much more afraid of the Bando Gora than any bounty hunter.
Any sign of Montrose?
I checked around. Heard he's in the Gazari system.
A lucky break. That's nowhere near Malastare. Gruff Hog must have lied to him.
He was probably more afraid of the Bando Gora than he was of Montrose.
You get a couple scenes with Vosa herself and this creepy guy. The game does an excellent job of building up their presence and intimidation. The entire game is leading up to finding them, and eventually you do. When you arrive on the planet, it's dark. But you are not alone. It doesn't take long before they swarm you. Up until now, you mostly are dealing with enemies with blasters. They keep their distance and shoot at you. There are melee enemies, but they're slow and are only in small groups. But the Bandogora are fast and numerous. It is very easy to get overwhelmed, and they can blend in, making it hard to see them at a distance. You never know just how many there are, and the very first room demonstrates this perfectly. You'll be fighting a swarm of them immediately. The flamethrower is your best friend against them, as it will instantly kill anything it touches. But it also requires you to be close range, and you can't move while using it, so you're not safe when using it. And some of them do shoot at you. You keep killing them, but more and more still come. It may look like you've dealt with all of them in an area, but once you move forward, you get hit by another swarm. It feels like they just come out of nowhere. They can very easily sneak up on you. It's just like Roz said.
They're everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
After all the build-up, finally getting there and having to face the closest thing to zombies in a Star Wars universe outside of Death Troopers was a bit panic-inducing the first time. Jeez, these things even die creepily. Also, Vosa herself is pretty creepy.
Six!
Remember when Rayman was Ubisoft's mascot instead of a white hood? Now you might be thinking, why am I talking about Rayman in a video about things that scared me? Well, it's interesting how you seem to have forgotten about Rayman 2. It's funny how the game that is considered to be the best is, when you think about it, the black sheep of the series. Let's look at the other games. The first game was a cheerful, whimsical, and lighthearted platformer. About the only thing scary was its difficulty. And the same could be said for Rayman 3, and especially Origins and Legends. And do I even need to bring up the fucking rabbits? When you take a look at the series as a whole, Rayman 2 really does stick out. It's a tad darker than you would expect from this goofball. It still retains the whimsy of the other games, it didn't go all Shadow the Hedgehog on us, but it was much more serious in tone. The game doesn't start with our heroes just lying around and starting the plot by annoying some granny with their snoring. It starts with the world already in peril. An army of robotic space pirates have come and devastated everything. They're enslaving the population. They've destroyed the heart of the world. They've even defeated Rayman. He is powerless with the heart destroyed, and he's just another prisoner with no hope left. Now, the entire game isn't doom and gloom. You do break out with the help of Glowbox and continue to save more people. But the pirates always have this intimidating presence, and the only way to really defeat them is with the help of Polokus, who is pretty much the god of this universe. The situation is so bad that the only way to get out of it is literally with divine intervention. Now, given the darker tone, naturally there are plenty of things that could potentially scare a young kid playing this. Could it be the Tomb of the Ancients with its foreboding atmosphere? How about these giant spiders with this intense piano playing? Or perhaps the zombie chickens who were formed as a result of hens laying dead eggs because of the pirates? I'm not kidding, that's actually where the zombie chickens came from. Well, those would be obvious picks, but the thing that scared me lies inside the Cave of Bad Dreams. At one point, you run into Clark, one of Rayman's friends, who has the biggest fucking chin I've ever seen. He's sick and asks you to get an elixir of life to revive him. Such elixir is only found in the Cave of Bad Dreams. Now, you could find this place in a previous level, but this guy won't let you in if you don't know the name of the cave. Now that you do know, you can go back. This place already gives you the creeps, and this guy, whose name is Jano, isn't helping. Especially when he tells you that he can read your mind, and that he's going to give you a head start. But if he catches up to you, he'll show you no mercy. Now, the cave itself isn't that bad. It does have the spooky theme down pat. It's the most memorable location in the game, and the music is great. The cave itself doesn't really scare you. But as you go along, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, when is Jano going to attack? You know it's gonna happen, but when? And then it happens. You fall down this hole, and as you're about to proceed, he appears coming out of the ground in a very creepy fashion. You start sliding down the slope, but then the camera pulls back into his mouth, giving you full view of his jaws. This right here is what scared me. You have to escape while constantly seeing just how close he is to devouring you, and you can see the drool dripping off his teeth. You don't want him to get close. And if he does... Once you get past the slide, you have a fight with him. Well, it's more of a platforming challenge than a boss fight. But that slide section, man, that is intense. And having his teeth visible the entire time was brilliant. I wish more games would do stuff like this.
5!
So the first three things weren't things that greatly scared me. They mostly freaked me out in a way that gave them a permanent place in my mind that I'll never forget. But for this entry, it actively prevented me from playing this game. When you're a kid, one of the coolest things ever are dinosaurs. So obviously Jurassic Park was the greatest thing ever. There have been many Jurassic Park games, but the one I've played is on the Super Nintendo. No, not that one. This one. Jurassic Park Part 2: The Chaos Continues. That's a mouthful of a title. Unfortunately, I am currently unable to record this game, so all footage of it comes from Jordan Van Dyke. The Chaos Continues can best be described as Contra with dinosaurs. Okay, well, there's more to it than that, but it's a side-scrolling shooter. The plot is that Biosyn, a rival company of InGen, is trying to take over Jurassic Park with a massive army. Your job as Alan Grant, yes, that Alan Grant, is to put a stop to it by going in guns blazing. Again, you're playing as Alan Grant, the guy who couldn't hit a raptor with a shotgun at close range. And he's being sent to single-handedly stop a hostile takeover of an island full of dinosaurs. I don't see how that could possibly go wrong. Each level has a different objective, whether it be stopping the hunters from capturing Gallimimus, or destroying a raptor nest in a volcano. There are levels where you're fighting other humans, and others where you fight dinosaurs, and a few with both. They require different tactics to fight, but the main threat with dinosaurs are the raptors. They're fast and aggressive. They can be pretty tough if you don't know how to deal with them. I used to play this game a lot with my sister. We were never able to beat any of the levels, but we sure tried. Now, I didn't have a problem playing this game with her, but I had a hard time playing most of the game by myself. See, whenever I played this game alone, there were only two levels I would play: Blockade and Protect the Gallimimus. Why those two levels? Because they were the only two levels you could pick from the start that only have human enemies. Back then, I was too scared to fight the raptors alone. If I was playing with my sister, I could do it, but by myself? Do you see how aggressive these things are? The moment they appear on screen, they make a beeline for you and pounce. That's the one strategy they have, and again, when you don't know how to deal with them, they can be pretty tough to beat. And you never know when they're gonna appear until they've already jumped you. The dark jungle atmosphere and the maze-like level design don't help either. And that's not even mentioning the T-Rex chase or the raptor attack mission where you go inside this facility and it gets even darker and this music plays. You think I could have handled this place on my own if I couldn't handle the jungle? Video games based on movies tend to get a bad rap, and it's not entirely unjustified. A lot of them tend to be cash grabs to capitalize on a popular movie, so not a lot of effort goes into them. But I feel like it's a bit unfair to say that in general games based on movies are bad. There are a fair amount that are actually pretty good, if not great, like Lord of the Rings. EA actually made a couple pretty good Lord of the Rings games. Don't worry, this was before they were completely awful. Two Towers and the Return of the King games were action-packed hack and slashes. While not too complex, they were pretty satisfying, especially Return of the King. But it's a bit odd that they did the latter two, and not Fellowship of the Ring. It might be because there weren't as many battles that would work with this gameplay. The Two Towers game actually starts with the few battles in Fellowship that could work. But what's a bit more likely is that there already was a Fellowship of the Ring game. This game is quite a bit different from the other games. For one, I think it's more so based off the book than the movie, and it's a lot slower paced. Now, unfortunately, just like Jurassic Park, I am unable to record my own footage as my copy is glitched and won't progress at a certain point. So all footage comes from Kawaii Games, link in the description. As a kid, I really wanted to play the two latter games because of how fun they looked, but my sister wouldn't let me play them until I beat Fellowship. Now that doesn't sound too bad, but there was one obstacle that got in the way very early on in the game. You'd probably guess what, since when you think of scary things in the Fellowship, the ring wraiths probably come to mind. Pretty early on in the game, you have a stealth section where you have to avoid ring wraiths. It's not that complicated, but when I first played it, it terrified me. These things already left quite an impression from the movie, but now I have to avoid them? You can't fight them. If they catch you, it's game over. The noises they make in the music don't help either. And listen to its voice.
Mr. Baggins has gone away. Left this morning. Why's none of my business? Or yours?
I actually forgot about that shroud of darkness that appears to be their field of vision. Kind of similar to the flashlight guards at the Sly Cooper games. I remember I was about to get caught by one of them and only managed to escape because I guess its AI glitched and just walked away. I was terrified and relieved. As much as I was scared, I forced myself to get past it so I could see the rest of the game and be able to play the other games.
It's okay. We're gonna...
Lights off. 3!
Even the most kid-friendly series can have a dark side. The Mario series is known for being family-friendly fun. It's full of bright, colorful worlds and cheerful, bouncy music. But even with a series as friendly as this, sometimes something dark slips through the cracks. Now, for most of the main Mario platformers, there isn't much dark stuff in them. Maybe a creepy Easter egg every now and then, or a slightly eerie ghost house. But it's the spin-offs that have the darkest stuff in them. The spin-offs tend to be more experimental, meaning they aren't afraid of putting in creepy stuff like this. Most of them look bright and cheery on the outside, but there's one game in particular that doesn't even try to hide its tone. Luigi has been living in his brother's shadow for so long, which is probably why Luigi's mansion is so dark, both literally and figuratively. In this game, Luigi wins a mansion from a contest he didn't enter, but when he gets there, he's attacked by ghosts and his brother is missing. He then needs to explore the mansion and capture the ghosts that reside there to find Mario. There's quite a lot of dark stuff in this game, and plenty that could scare a young kid. Was it the creepy baby ghost? Was it Bogmire? Was it seeing Mario trapped in the painting? Was it the blackout? Or maybe the glitched shadow in the phone room that kinda looks like Luigi being hanged? No, it wasn't any of those. The thing that scared me when I played this game for the first time was the very first dark room. Yep, this room here. You gotta understand, I was a kid at the time, and I haven't played any horror games before this. I wouldn't exactly say Luigi's Mansion is horror, but it comes close. This game doesn't even hide the spooky tone. This is the first thing you hear when you turn the game on. And the opening cutscene with Luigi slowly approaching this creepy-looking mansion with this music...
Hello?
Yeah, playing this as a kid was a bit scary. And then you go into this room and get attacked by a ghost, so obviously I wouldn't want to go back in there. But you need to go back in there. That's the only way forward. I spent a while in the foyer trying to see if there was anything else I could do besides going through that door. Eventually, I would brave the darkness to get it over with. But when you go in, nothing happens. The ghosts don't appear until you blow out those candles. But I didn't know that. For all I knew, they could attack at any moment. I'd go in, maybe walk around a bit, but then just leave. Eventually, I gave up and played Melee instead. Look, I was used to Mario games being like this. This was completely different. I would soon after try again and actually play the game, but the game didn't let up on the scares.
2.
This next game is an actual horror game, and it's also one I've never actually played myself. It is kind of an infamous game, depending on who you ask, and I'm sure some of you might cringe when you hear it. It's the first Five Nights at Freddy's. So, I was introduced to this game through my friend who asked if I had heard about it before. I said no, and he showed me Markiplier's playthrough of it. I'm sure you're aware of the premise. You're the night guard at a pizzeria, and you're trying to avoid being murdered by some possessed animatronics. As I was watching this playthrough, I became very fascinated with it. The atmosphere, the way the game messed with your head, some pretty creepy and subtle changes to the environment, and it had a good balance of skill and luck. But something else was happening. I found myself turning the volume down as far as I could, and I looked away anytime we'd turn on the lights. I'd look at the comments trying to find timestamps for when jump scares happened so I could prepare for them. Was I scared? No, it couldn't be. This was in 2014. I was like 19 at the time. Nothing in games could scare me then. But it didn't stop there. At night, when I was the only one still awake, I became hesitant to open doors, or to go up or down stairs in the dark. And while I've never gotten any nightmares, I found it a bit harder to get to sleep. Now, this game didn't scare me as much as other entries on this list did at the time of experiencing it. With everything else, it happened when I was a kid. When these other entries scared me as a kid, it was scarier than when FNAF scared me as a 19-year-old, if that makes any sense. It didn't scare me in the sense that I wanted to avoid it. It scared me in a way that I found very fascinating. I watched more playthroughs. I tried to learn everything I could about how the game worked. The reason this is so high on the list is because of the timing of it and how it affected me. It had been years since any piece of media actually scared me. So when this game comes along and is actually successful in keeping me up at night, yeah, I think it's worth putting this high. Now currently, I've watched so many playthroughs of it that it doesn't scare me in the slightest anymore. The jump scares don't get any reaction at all from me now. Also, I think it's worth noting that it was only the first game that had this kind of effect on me. While I think some of the future games had interesting concepts and mechanics in them, I don't think they've ever recaptured the feeling of dread and panic the first game had. FNAF suffers from the same problem horror movie series have. The more and more sequels they pump out, the less scary it becomes. They've jumped the shark in a few aspects, and didn't have some of the things that made the first one as scary as it was. I also think in terms of visuals, the first game was superior. It was darker, and sometimes it could be hard to notice if anyone was there. Plus the designs were a lot simpler in the first. I feel like the later games try way too hard to look scary, especially 4 and 6. Also, when they looked at the camera, it felt like they were looking at you. Like they could see you through it. While in some of the others, it didn't have that same effect. Like this in the second game. If I was working there and changed the camera and saw this, I'd be startled for a second, but I'd think it was just a coworker who moved it there to mess with me. But if I saw this, then I'd actually be afraid. Really, these two images best showcase what I'm talking about. So, what is the thing that scared me the most as a kid? Well, it should be obvious. There's only one possible choice. It's that damn piano from Mario 64. No, that thing never really scared me. It's a bit startling, but come on guys, it's not that scary. But for real, you might be shocked to find out that the thing that scared me more than anything else comes from Rayman 3, actually. But you might be wondering, how could it be Rayman 3? You already said 2 was the darkest in the series, and that 3 was a lot more lighthearted. Well, yes, as a whole, Rayman 2 is much darker, and has more things in it that could possibly scare a kid. But there is one location in Rayman 3 that's unlike the rest. For most of the game, you're looking for different doctors to help Glowbox because he swallowed the main villain. When you get to the second doctor, he redirects you to the final one, in the desert of the Knaaren.
At
This burns! Quick, get in the shade!
The moment you step into this place, it already looks like hell. The sand is blood red and burns on contact, and those giant bones make it look like a slightly cartoonish version of Doom. Anyone else see that, or is it just me? You continue forward, and things seem fine, even with the foreboding atmosphere. But then you rescue a couple of teensies, and they tell you to go through the caves to get to the next doctor. But also...
But it won't be easy! The tunnels are swarming with Knaaren, and those beasts are invincible!
Yeah, well, you got a better idea?
You bet your $1 I do!
Okay, listen closely, Big Nose. Do not let the Knaaren get near you. You understand? Never! If they get their claws on you, you're dead. Well, it was a nice knowing ya!
That sounds lovely, but I'm sure it's nothing I can't handle. I've been fighting hordes of enemies, and nothing has been able to stop me.
Let me go!
This instantly put me in a panic the first time I played this. Falling into this dark cave with this music and seeing this freaky thing break through the wall terrified me. Immediately, you're being chased by a Knaaren. I tried fighting it, but it didn't work. That TNC wasn't lying. The Knaaren are invincible. You can't fight back. Remember what I said at the beginning about how in horror games you aren't powerful? But it can be much scarier if it isn't a horror game because you are powerful and then your power is stripped away. You're used to being able to fight back. Up until this point, you've been fighting hordes of hoodlums. But then you get to the Knaaren, and you can't fight them at all. After escaping this first encounter and falling down here, I remember just standing there, staring at that Knaaren in the distance. I knew that I had to go that way, and that the moment I did, that thing would start chasing me. Look at this thing. It's terrifying. Well, okay, looking back on it now, the face is a little goofy, but even still, it's freaky looking. I remember taking quite a while before I would move forward from this position. I didn't want to get anywhere near this thing. But eventually, I moved and fell down here. And I also remember it took a while before I would move away from here as well.
Crush his bone.
Oh shit, I forgot they actually talked. This is supposed to be a cartoonish, colorful kids game, and it has these monstrous creatures saying shit like this in a demonic voice.
Tear off his flesh. Skin him. Stick bamboo under his nails. Let him run. Meat better with salt. Make him write bad checks.
Wait, did he say make him write bad checks? Well, it doesn't matter what they actually say. That voice alone was terrifying. And then there's their roars. What's worse is that this entire level is about getting the Knaaren to move to specific places. Like in this part, you need to ring this gong to distract it, and then you need to go where it was standing before he comes back. After that, you get to this part where you need to put this egg on a switch and oh shit, the zombie chickens are back. Well, at least they aren't as creepy looking as they were in 2. Eventually you get to this large room with 3 Knaaren wandering around. At first it doesn't seem so bad, there's a lot of room to be able to avoid them. But then you figure out you need to lure one of them here to press this switch for you. Getting close to them was the last thing I ever wanted to do. And now the game wants me to get them to follow me up there? This level likes to put Knaaren in narrow hallways. There's also this part where if you fall you get chased by 3 of them. Also this spiral tower where you need to hide from them as they walk by, but it can be easy to get caught. And then on 2 separate occasions you get cornered and it looks like there's no escape, but then the floor collapses. After that you get captured by a Reflux, the strongest of the Knaaren, and you have to fight him. Yeah, sure, we've already established that these things are invincible and you want me to fight him? Luckily you can hurt him for some reason. This may not seem like much to you, but as a kid it scared me so much that I haven't played through this level, and I'm not kidding, until I recorded it for this video. This game came out in 2003. I first played it around that time. That's how much it scared me. I would replay other levels in this game, but not that one. It also scared me so much that even though I haven't played it in about 15 years, I remembered a lot about it. I remembered the scorching desert, falling into the caves for the first time, this room, the giant room with the bird statue, the chicken ghosts, the spiral tower, all of this. Playing through this after all that time was quite the experience. I'm well beyond the point where this would still scare me, but it was really interesting replaying it and recognizing almost everything. So much of it I instantly remembered when I saw it. It made that much of an impression. What was also pretty interesting was that I found a few teensies I missed the first time. Now I don't have all of them in the other levels, but some of these were in obvious locations. Goes to show the mindset I was in at the time to ignore them. I'm surprised I don't hear more people talk about this level. It's a shame, really.
Hey, guys! I mean, don't you feel guilty about ganging up on a guy when he's all alone? No. Why? Do you? No, of course not! What was I thinking? I'm done.
And those were the 8 things that scared me the most in video games. None of these things scare me anymore, but I could never forget the time when they did. What are some of the things that scared you? There's quite a lot of scary things in games to choose from, whether they're in a horror game or not. And with that, all I have to say is, Happy Halloween.
My dad is stronger than your dad! No way! My dad's stronger than your dad! I heard his friend say that he can even pick up a dog! Would you guys please stop talking about your dads?
You hear the beating of your heart, you know the screaming's gonna start. Here comes the